Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where it was this week in 1981 that Rick James, we'll get to the jokes later, really revitalized funk, soul, and R&B and its various subgenres by creating an album that firmly declared all of the stuff you liked about the 70s is here in the 80s, but it's repackaged in a new sound with a new intensity and, the drug prices are always going to be consistent, even though there was quite a lot of inflation in 1981. That's right, because Street Songs was released on this week. And all stereotypes aside and all real life stories about what happened during the recording sessions aside, it was a killer album. It was great songwriting, all written by Rick himself, some of them with a bit of co-writing out, but it was pretty much all him. And each track was really a winner. Give It To Me, Baby, one of the classic dance tracks ever. Super Freak, absolute legendary track Fire and Desire that he did with the wonderful Tina Marie, absolutely excellent. And there were a lot of great musicians on the album. I mean, you've got Narada Michael Walden, who was absolutely at the peak of his powers. You got Gerald Albright there. You had Stevie Wonder play harmonica on the track Mr. Policeman. You had Levi Ruffin, great musician playing the synth. So the album was a sort of instant classic, and it proved that even though disco as it was marketed was gone, so long as it had funk and soul to it, people would get up on the dance floor, and people in the 80s liked dancing just as much as they did in the 70s. Now, the elephant in the room, this album became the go-to album for people doing something with their nose. And I'm not talking about the ubiquitous scratch and sniff magazines, unless you want to use that as a euphemism. Now, Rick James, for better or worse, came to embody that lifestyle of 80s excess, the opposite of self-preservation, but having a lot of fun. And people did have a lot of fun. Fun was still legal, as it should be. And of course, because he was an icon of that era and of that genre, and because much of that was because of this album, in the early 2000s, Rick James was immortalized by none other than the great Dave Chappelle and crew. And you all know the line, cocaine's a hell of a drug, and it's still a meme to this day. And I think that's very important because it speaks to the staying power of this album that Rick James created, just as much as it speaks to the staying power of Dave Chappelle's A-plus comedy routines. And when you put them together, you get a cultural landmark that people are still grooving along to and still laughing with and still smiling about long after the album came out, long after Rick James's sad death. But, it wasn't that hard to see that coming. Of course, even before Chappelle, the song had a second life when just under 10 years after the original Super Freak came out, of course, MC Hammer sampled it and it became You Can't Touch This. So the song had staying power. And when you think about it, it came out in 81. I think it was in around 1990, maybe 91. Don't quote me on that, when MC Hammer did his sample. And then maybe 10 years or so after that, the Dave Chappelle did what he did. So that was 30 years where this song, Super Freak from this album, really comes back. Now that's what I call staying power. And don't get me wrong, this album is a hell of a drug. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.